Where did you get those inspirations to go into cybersecurity?
I was kind of pushed towards it from a lot of my family as they kind of learned about what it was, because my personality, at least online, is kind of the same as my personality in real life to an extent, where I'm just an absolute monster and would go around and like to break things and see what makes them work and how and why. And
That's
then,
what a hacker is, man. That's what a hacker is. Yeah.
Exactly. And then, yeah, it's definitely a secure or inquisitorial mindset that you want to have, and curiosity and looking at things and seeing how and why they work. And that's kind of what just leads you down rabbit holes. And sometimes those rabbit holes, you get to a point where you're like, okay, if I go any further, this can, one, land me in some big trouble, and two, this is stuff I'm not going to want to see.
You've been listening to my friend, The Laughing Man, and this is the Emotive Podcast. I'm your host, Dan, and just a quick thank you to all of you that have reached out and given me kind words, feedback about the podcast. Keep that coming. Send that to me, at Emotive Podcast on Twitter. All relevant links are at pod.co/emotive. And if you want to help grow the show, rate, review, subscribe, all those things. I do thank you very much for that. My guest today, The Laughing Man, well, he's a hacker. He likes to test systems to see how far they can go before they break, to test if a company's security is up to snuff. But don't worry, he's a white hat hacker. He's one of the good guys. You'll be happy to know that he is one of the good guys. Well, he kind of discovered cybersecurity through sort of circumstance and maybe even a process of elimination, I think you'll be interested to hear really like what drives him to do what he does and why it's a perfect fit for him. And we get a little bit of inside knowledge on what it's like to be on the red team, which we'll get into in the episode. Well, that's it. Just enjoy the episode. Here is my conversation with The Laughing Man. Today on the show, we've got Shades. What's up, man?
How's it going? Nice to hear from you.
Yeah, so I've been trying to kind of get you on here for a while, and there was actually over the summer, you and I were corresponding on these like bigger plans that I had for Emotive and how we wanted to do this series on hacking, and specifically we really wanted to do what we ended up settling on was something on sort of gray markets like G2A and stuff like that. But, in the process of researching and just a bunch of stuff happened, and I realized the scope of just doing something like that and having it come out the way I wanted it to, it just didn't happen. And I'd be happy to work on something in the future. But yeah, it made me realize how much work that would actually be required to do something like that.
Absolutely. I think our eyes were kind of bigger than our stomachs when we first.
Well,
first
more
went
on
after
my
that.
side, you were just you were gracious enough to offer help and sort of doing some of the research and giving me insight into how some of these things can happen, credit card fraud and stuff like that. You pointed me out to a really cool podcast called Darknet Diaries, which I kind of got a little bit obsessed with. People should check that show out. But it got me into another world of like security researchers and other lines of work that are beyond my intelligence level, but definitely like really cool stories. So let's just start off with why you chose the name that you use, wherever
absolutely.
it came from. Yeah.
So kind of way back, I guess Shades came from back when we were doing, M2 gaming, things like that. My
Right.
kind of moniker was to be, I like to play the villain against everybody on the servers we were on, and I would always make stupid videos with sunglasses on. So then it just kind of evolved into Shades.
You were kind of like this solo bandit when we were playing DayZ mod, but you weren't like a totally malicious bandit. You really like to kind of push the limits of how you could kind of lurk in the shadows and strike when necessary. But a lot of times it was playful and it was fun. But M2 Gaming was this community that we were both involved with, and M2 Gaming actually was one of the reasons why I started streaming, which is kind of interesting that I have you on here, because you're one of the last remaining people that I still kind of talk to from that era. It's sort of this unknown era, but yeah, just basically like this little community of like-minded people, and we would get groups that would play DayZ together. And so what kind of expand upon that, like what why were you like this solo player? Like why did you not kind of gravitate towards playing in groups? Like what was it about that you really enjoyed?
Well, I guess for one is I've always enjoyed being kind of a griefer. I was always, kind of that kid that would, be screaming into their mic, that type of deal. But that was a long time ago. But it kind of evolved, and as we got involved in that community, we saw a lot of people kind of gravitated in one giant group. So the PvP aspect was really non-existent for quite a while. And me and I think one or two other people kind of took it upon ourselves to separate from the group and kind of try to grief, destroy bases, steal items. I think there were a few points like we would steal stuff, hide them out in the middle of nowhere, and then make ransom videos and post them on our own forums, things like that.
Well, I don't know. Like, what other games did you come from where you would have that kind of griefer mentality?
I think a lot of it came out of early World of Warcraft. Not really
Okay.
griefer as in base destroying, but more of just going in and kind of ganking low levels, doing things like that. Because there was a point in time, at least in that game, where that was just kind of all you really had to do outside of raiding. PvP was getting there, but kind of not quite. So it was World PvP, which was more of take the opportunity to kill who you can.
Huh. Okay. Yeah, the Shades moniker is just kind of like, what were you trying to put forth with that? Were you trying to be like ironic with that, right?
A little bit. I think a lot of it was I watched too many like James Bond-esque movies where you got the bad
Okay.
guy with the big sunglasses.
Right. Well, sure. Yeah, you were the bad guy. Although it's funny because how you presented in that community wasn't you definitely, but there was already kind of that antagonistic thing in DayZ mod where people were pitted against each other. So it wasn't out of place necessarily, right?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
you didn't go out of your way to like fall out of favor with people in the community. Was M2 one of those communities where like what attracted you to the group of people that we were in? Did it change you at all?
Yeah, absolutely. I really enjoyed playing with a lot of the people that I met, and I made some friends that have lasted for years, like for you for example. But
Hmm.
one of the big things was it was fun to kind of grief and go in and kind of destroy stuff and run amok and be a little terror. But at the same time, you kind of didn't want to step on anybody's toes to the point where, people don't want to play games with you or you don't want to be your friend anymore. You kind of want to have this dynamic where you're still going to, if we found another game like APB or something along those lines, we'd go
Yeah.
play something third party and still have a good time.
Yeah, yeah. Well, were there instances in the past where you were just kind of like a scorched earth policy, as it were, like didn't really care?
I think the time we met was about the one time, and I learned pretty quick not to do that because that was the first time I played DayZ. And I think I stole like a truck you guys had hidden full of
Mm,
guns. And then I asked you for why the helicopter wouldn't fly. And I think the windshield was broken and it wouldn't take
mm.
gas. Had no idea how that worked. But you're telling me about it. And then all of a sudden sniped me from the airfield.
Yeah, I don't know if I remember that strangely, but there was a lot. I think there's a bit of that time period that I block out just because of some of the drama and other stuff that went on kind of overshadowed some of like the good moments. But did you go by any other names? Like you go by a different name now, but I still kind of referred to you as Shades because that's how I knew you.
Absolutely. Shades kind of evolved for a bit into Shadow and Shadow the Tank. So a lot of that was
Right.
revolving around
That's
the World of
that.
Warcraft. So.
Yeah, that's World of Warcraft.
But I guess now it's kind of evolved into now I usually use the Laughing Man, which anyone who's an anime fan will know that's straight out of Ghost in a Shell, and that's a really popular hacker name. And because of that, I can kind of stay under the radar in some forums still, while
Mm,
uh, not so subtle names are pretty easy to pick out across several different forums and chat rooms.
sure. Well, but you were pretty young like back then too. Like you're still young. Like to be honest, like you sound really young. Like you sound like maybe you're like in your early 20s. And I'm not exactly sure. I think I think you're like what, like maybe 23, 24 now.
Yep, exactly. 24 now. I
Yeah,
think way back
yeah,
then I was, gosh, I think I was end of middle school, just starting high school.
crazy, man. Yeah, crazy. But we tried to be. I feel like we like. I wasn't one of like the senior members of the community. I felt like we were pretty inclusive. What I recognized in you was just a. I don't know. I just thought you were a really bright kid, and you had such a unique mind. Let's just talk about your education and like where that all took you, because you tried to go to college after high school, right?
Yeah, I tried briefly. Originally, I was really into computers. I was really into gaming. I went to a really small high school, and we didn't really have much of a tech program.
Mm,
And so I was kind of pushed. They were like, "Well, if you like computers, go to electrical engineering." Tried that. That is a very daunting thing to even look at, especially when you get all the math involved. There are much smarter people than me out there that can handle that, but I could not. So I ended up dropping out, and I got 3 part-time jobs, and I realized that was awful too. And
uh,
then cybersecurity became a hot word within 3 years of that.
yeah, where did you get those inspirations to go into cybersecurity?
I was kind of pushed towards it from a lot of my family as they kind of learned about what it was, because my personality, at least online, is kind of the same as my personality in real life to an extent where I'm just an absolute monster and would go around and like to break things and see what makes them work and how and why. And
That's what a
then
hacker is, man. That's what a hacker is. Yeah.
exactly. And then my family was kind of like, well, you like to do all that, but a lot of that's illegal. So here's a way you could do it legally and actually make a living and not, go to jail or anything crazy.
Hmm. Okay. So your family actually found a creative solution to that's really like insightful of your family to suggest that. I feel like a lot of people's family would just be more, I don't know, I guess maybe parents are different now. From my generation, I was interested in computers, and their solution to me tinkering with computers and accidentally, breaking small parts and stuff like that was like, you don't get to use computers in the house ever again. and your parents were like, okay, let's actually like find something to channel your energy into that's going to be productive.
Yeah, I think I kind of left them with no choice just because I was always the kid that would stay up on, Xbox or PC until
Okay.
3, 4 in the morning.
You were
And
you were just insatiable with this.
yeah, and they were kind of backed into a corner, and they figured anything that they tried to push me towards would be kind of a fruitless effort because I would just gravitate towards the PC again.
Huh. Did you ever have times where your parents got like really upset about that, and they said, you need to be focusing more on your studies, or you need to stop playing video games?
Oh yeah, it was a constant fight.
It
Pretty
was
pretty
okay.
much all of high school and middle school. My grades were really bad because
Mm,
I hated English. I hated the majority of my classes. I just liked history, and I liked what few tech classes they offered.
mm. I don't know. I think it is really interesting that your parents eventually got to that point where they did find like a path for you to where you are now. Obviously now you are working in IT as what would you consider your title right now? Like a
It was previously penetration tester. Now it's the head of cyber operations for a small
oh,
cybersecurity firm. So
cool, cool, cool.
kind of, I guess, red team would be the best way to describe it. Red team
Red
IT.
team the attackers versus, yeah, blue team being the defenders. We'll get into that in a minute, because that's so fascinating to me. Yeah, the fact that you got there like kind of naturally. Well, obviously you tried to go to college. You had the unique American experience of having these really shitty part-time jobs, which I feel like is the experience of most well-adjusted adults. That kind of have to go through that. It's almost like a rite of passage here in America, where you have to go through these crappy like retail jobs. But at least you know what that's like, and you know that you don't want to go back to it ever.
I
Like that's not an option for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And what it also, at least for me, did was it made it a lot easier for me to kind of talk to people, not only at like a organizational level, but when you're
Mm.
talking person to person, because especially when you're working part time during the holiday season, and people are just
Oh God.
absolute monsters towards you. you kind of
Yeah.
respect the people that work there, and you understand what is and
Oh, yeah.
isn't in their control.
That is an important thing. I came from retail. I was thinking about it today. I'm in the grocery store. I enjoy being in the grocery store. Maybe I'm a sick bastard. I've always liked it. As a kid, I always wanted to work in the grocery store. I enjoyed it for a good majority of the decade that I did it. But around the holidays sometimes, and I talked about in my last episode with Grant and how I would lash out and I would freak out and shit. You know, I liked the hang with the dudes in the department, but when it came to holidays, it was like this extra stress, and it seemed like everyone would come out of the woodwork and everything was happening at once. But yeah, going through that now, it still has kind of ruined holidays for me. I don't like holiday music. The holiday music in the store today was pissing me the F off, dude. I didn't want to hear it. It was like 18 renditions of like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. Like, you don't need to keep remaking these songs.
Yeah, we had that too. We had one issue. The holiday track one year was actually so short; it was only about 8 different songs. So by the end of an 8-hour shift, you'd heard them at least 10 times.
Oh no! Here's a recent thing that was they're doing this like test holiday at the store I worked at, and it was like a week. They're doing like Italian themed stuff, so they're marketing all these like Italian themed cheeses, and because I worked in the deli recently over the like 5 years ago or something, but this is when I went back to retail to see if I would still enjoy it. Now I'm out permanently. I'm out. I'm not going back. Fuck it. I learned my lesson. 2 strikes. Anyway, so they were playing like Lady and the Tramp songs or something. Like the when the moon hits your eye like a big pizza pie. But they're like could only think of like 4 or 5. It was probably 10 songs, but it seemed like that song played every like 10 minutes. That's not even possible, but it really seemed like it. Oh man, I got really sick of that song. It was only a week. And we had these aprons we had to wear that were like, it looked like an Italian flag, but it was really, really like yellow, orange. And then it had I forget the Italian flag colors, but it just looked like clowns, basically. It was like a big circus, which is kind of like what a retail store is anyway during the holidays.
Oh yeah, it's absolute insanity. I'm happy I'm out.
We're both out, but I am so nice to those folks because I relate to them, and I will strike up conversations when it's appropriate, and I will relate to the person. But I'm not going to bug them unless I really have to, because I know that they got shit to do and they're not being paid well enough. So, and if I have to wait a little bit longer to check out or something, doesn't matter. I'm not upset with the person. It's not their fault that there's a line at the checkout.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's fine. Nowadays, we don't even really. We pretty much like there's like self checkouts now.
Yeah, those have made life a lot easier.
But there was another thing I wanted to touch about with your parents, and maybe like parents in general, and sort of this. It's really a problem in our society that we have this like creative energy to put forward, and I don't know. I think that there's more resources for kids now, but like if your parents don't want you to participate in certain things, or they like don't see it, like you could just have all this creative energy, and you just have nowhere you have nowhere to place it, but yet there is like things that you could be doing, right? And so unless you have like good teachers that recognize that in you, or eventually like your parents figure it out and they're like, oh shit, here is something that old Mr. Shades can do, like what do you think that like could have gone better for you when you were younger that could have put you on that track quicker, or would you just not trade any of those experiences?
I definitely think figuring out that there was like computer science was even a thing back then would have been nice. Because apparently that's been huge for a long time. I didn't find out till after I dropped out the first time around. But I definitely would have appreciated more encouragement with the computer, because yeah, I did spend a lot of time, on video games and just kind of doing random junk or whatever I wanted to do. But there was also this aspect where like I was building my own PC when I was fairly young for the time. And even though I failed horribly and I burnt out a really expensive CPU, I learned a lesson from it. I figured out, okay, this is how you're supposed to build a computer.
That's like
And
putting your hand on a hot stove when you're
yeah,
younger. You're like, I will never do this again.
yeah,
That hurts.
yeah. It's very upsetting, especially when you're, because again, I was working part-time retail at that time, because I've worked part-time jobs since I think I was 14. When you lose a CPU, I think it was like a 3770K, and at the time that was a really good processor,
Oof.
and it was pretty expensive. And you're like, well, there goes a month's pay, and you learn very fast that if you don't want to kind of just be throwing money in the trash, that you got to figure out what you're doing the right way.
I guess I'm surprised that like computer science never came up. Computer science was something that I knew about, and really like when I started school in the fall of 2000. The class of 2000, man. That was my class. It was my friends that really wanted to go into IT, and I followed them, and of course I didn't I didn't stick to school either. I quickly realized that while I'm interested in computers, when it comes to coding, like I needed to bone up my math skills and stuff. I didn't have the mind for it, and I didn't know that until until I got to school, and then I didn't know none of the other majors looked good to me. So yeah, same for me. Like I dropped out, and I'm currently going to be finishing up like an associate's degree
Oh, nice.
at the community college here. But that was more to the idea was just to prove to myself that I could could still like hack it in school, at least to an extent. I mean, it's like a business and marketing associates, right? But it's not anything. It's a very general degree, but there were a lot of classes that I took that it seemed relevant to my interests now. But I still, for whatever reason, I still have this like nerd tendencies to enjoy the history, the mechanics of how I want to understand how IT systems work, how cybersecurity firms work. Because I feel like that's just like part of being well informed, like understanding what the risks are when it comes to being online, and when it comes to like being on Twitch nowadays, and having like some sort of an internet presence, and just knowing like how you can mitigate some of those risks. So some of that is like keeping up to date on like all of your software. Well, that's like the main deal. But then also like keeping on the fringes of these circles of people who talk about issues, so what's not being like different things that come up over the years. Because when I started out, well, even now, like people still, I've been doing work study at the school, and I'm in the computer lab, and I just like sit there and help people get into their little account where they can like print their their like assignments and shit. It's really nothing, but so many times people they use like parts of their personal information in their passwords, and they can't figure out why they can't set their password. Well, there's like a standard to it. Like you can't put your name in your password. Like, God, you shouldn't even put like dictionary words in there. It's like, my goodness, for how far that we've come, people still want things like easy. Like they don't understand that they could be at risk.
Absolutely.
So
And I would say a lot of that's kind of a cultural thing, at least from my point of view, where a lot of the clients that I work with will end up being a bit older, 50s, 60s, and they grew up,
okay,
internet was a hobbyist thing back then.
yeah,
And they'll go in, just kind of do what they need to do on it. They weren't, they don't usually work with it on a daily basis out of it being something they enjoy. And because of that, we see a lot of the younger kids coming into these companies actually being much more savvy to the issues that they might face in there, and they're using better passwords. They're using more complex, security measures when they're trying to keep their accounts safe. And whereas these older people are just like, well, if it works, I'm happy. So
yeah. Yeah, I think that last part, that's a lot of it. People see it as like a hassle versus like an extra shield between them and something bad happening. Yeah, I think it takes them seeing that it is possible, that it that it is a threat somehow. Like it's almost I don't know. Since it's like digital, and it doesn't seem real to people. It doesn't seem real to people that well, for some reason, like the Y2K thing, the Y2K bug seemed really real to people, but I don't know. It's almost like information overload nowadays. People don't even realize that there are like major hacks that go on all the time. All like the blue team guys, the guys that are defending against these attacks, like they're constantly having to be on their toes, you know? And what I've learned from, well, at least this is my assessment. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but the most like the weakest link in the chain of security is always seems to be the human factor, right?
A lot of the time, that's absolutely spot on, and that's kind of what we strive to negate. Is that a lot of people go in with that mindset that the human factor is the weakest. So what's the point, or why are we trying to secure things? We're like, well, if you give proper training and you empower your employees to be able to recognize and mitigate threats, they don't become the weakest link anymore. They become one of your best assets. And these are people that can go in and they can recognize when your organization's under attack. They can recognize phishing emails coming in. They can recognize social engineering attempts and report it up the chain and give blue team, the IT guys, a heads up and kind of insight into what's going on, because sometimes these IT guys, they're overburdened with just trying to keep the place running, let alone look at the
Oh
security
yeah.
threats.
I mean, it's a business. It's not automated. There's not, no, well, some things are automated. Things have gotten a lot easier, I'm sure. Things aren't really done on paper anymore, but there's still managing the people, all of the logistics of things. Still, there's still work to be done every day. But let's, before we get into in the weeds here, but this is all very interesting to me. I think it'd be cool to hear about what your first, like, how did you get your start as what you said before as like a penetration tester, and maybe just explain just briefly what that is. And I think a lot of people would know, but some people might not know what that is.
Absolutely. So I guess it started out. When I went back to school, I went to a small community college just close to home, just to get an associate's and see what I can do with it. And from there, I went on and decided, okay, I really like this. Went on to a 4-year school, and after my first semester, it was kind of weird. Even though the schools had an articulation agreement, everything that you learn at the 2-year school, once you go to the 4-year school, it's essentially review. So I was just blowing through the classes really easily, and the one of the professors saw what I was doing and kind of went to his friend, who 3 professors founded my company together, and they gave me an offer to come work for them while I finished my studies. So I did that part time while finishing my degree. And when I graduated, they kind of brought me onto it as a penetration tester. So essentially, I kind of live more in the world of red team now than strictly penetration testing. So penetration testing has to deal with going in and finding vulnerabilities in code and finding exploits and attacking systems using them. Whereas red team kind of combines that with also doing things like social engineering, getting people to give up information, open source intelligence gathering, finding out as much as you can about a target with as little information as you're given, things along those lines.
I just want to make sure that I'm getting this straight. So the company that you got started at were these professors that did they teach some of the classes that you attended?
Uh, it's kind of odd. One of them was the director of the entire cybersecurity program,
Oh, I see. Okay.
and I never had him as a professor directly, but he's an extremely nice. He's the nicest human I think I've ever met, and he will go out of
Huh.
his way, bend over backwards to help you with an issue. So he's very close to all the students and kind of checks up and knows where they are at any given time.
Okay. Nice. It must have been kind of cool to be a part of that. It probably wasn't something that you expected either.
No, honestly, I was expecting to go try to work for the government. After
Okay.
graduation, everyone reads the really cool spy books, NSA, FBI, all that.
Yeah.
But going in, I was extremely fortunate with the position that I was given, and I was extremely lucky to be where I was when I was there, because I
Mm.
was right when their person who was previously part time, kind of doing what I fell into, uh, ended up moving across the state to go work somewhere else. So they had the opening to fill, and they had someone to fill it with.
Right. So you're now currently living like how far from where you grew up?
I'm about a 45-minute drive from
Oh, that's not
home
bad.
home, so it's not
Oh,
bad at
that's
all.
not bad. That's not bad. Yeah, yeah. So now you're kind of red team. And the company has grown a little bit, I'm assuming, taking
Yes,
on more clients.
it's
Yeah.
been insane with the growth. We started out, it was the three founders, our business development, so four full timers, and me part time. And
Were
now
you a
we've,
contractor when you started, or were you actually just like a part-time employee?
it was just part time employment for me, but the office was located on campus, so it was really easy for me to
Oh
do.
wow, yeah,
But now I
cool,
think we're
man.
about 30 employees strong.
It really seems like a natural fit for you in that role for sure. Oh, I'm trying to think of all the questions. Look, we were talking before about, and you were mentioning kind of the structure of the company and what goes on, like blue team versus red team, and ways to eliminate the human weak link in the chain. But it's a constant it's a constant thing. That's why you're a full time. That's why you're employed full time, because this is 24/7. This isn't like, oh well, the hackers take the weekends off so we can have the weekends off too, like, how what is that like for you? How do you how does the company maintain like a healthy balance for the workers? Like, are you on call at times, or like how many hours do you have to work?
So my work hours vary widely depending on how many contracts we have live at any time. So if we're doing an external penetration test for a client 1 week, we might have 2 weeks where we just have nothing going on from that standpoint. But during that time, I'm usually keeping our own infrastructure up, developing new tools and attacks, going in and writing reports because all the clients usually we have to report to them in two different ways. We do one way where their IT team is going to understand what's going on and what needs to be fixed, but also where their C level, the CEO, the CTO, CFO, they're going to understand what their issues are and what they need to do so they can properly fund the IT team. But roughly, I'd say in a normal week, I work, the kind of standard 40 hours, but I work usually anywhere between 8 a.m. and 2 a.m. It just kind of depends on
Interesting.
when the work falls in the day.
Interesting. Yeah, you do have to be flexible because yeah, it's not a normal like business hours type of job, although it can be from the sounds of it. What are some of like some of the common threats, like common things that have really kind of plagued companies that you've worked with, or clients that you've worked with?
Yeah, I'm more than happy to be specific as long as I leave out company names. But
Yeah.
so a lot of them are just outdated software and hardware, honestly. So a few years ago, the NSA had a big leak where some of their tools were stolen and leaked online. It was about 2 years ago now, I think, a little over.
Oof.
Um, but it leaked a vulnerability that's known as Eternal Blue. And what this does is it allows someone without any username or password, if they're on the same network, to essentially point a script at a machine, and then they are at system 32 level after the script runs, which means keys to the castle essentially. But this came out years ago, and it affects very old Windows systems. It affects some new ones, but usually they're not hit as
Well,
hard.
which version of Windows and up would it affect, or and down would it affect?
On just about all of them.
Just about all of
Yeah,
them?
I think Windows
Wow.
10 came. Windows 10 might be affected to some degree, but not nearly as much as
Whoa.
others.
Oh shit.
I would have to double. Don't quote me on that. I have to double check my research on that one.
Wow.
But this vulnerability comes out years ago, and you would think everyone patched it because of how big of a threat that is. But we even last week I saw it on an internal and used it to take control of a machine, and it's just because these companies try to stretch their businesses. They got to stretch what they buy to the absolute limit, and sometimes they
Crazy.
don't realize in doing that they're creating vulnerabilities for themselves.
Yeah, it's got to be rough. And where my brain went, and I don't think this is a fair assessment, but where my brain went first, as like just a layman, is like, well, is it like a lazy system admin, or that like the head of the IT department? And maybe the head of the IT department is the whole IT department. They're just like the IT guy, right? You've heard that one before. I've heard that before, like nonprofits and stuff like that, where they really don't have much of a budget, and he's just like lazy, or he just doesn't realize that he's like doesn't like how much of that is true, and what is the reality? The reality is like just budgetary things, right?
In
and just time, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah, in my experience, it's kind of a 50-50 split. Because a lot of our clients are smaller clients. We're not some huge giant
Yeah,
company, and we don't,
of course.
service Amazon Web
You wouldn't.
Services.
Well, you wouldn't have the manpower to.
Yeah. So what we see is kind of a mix of IT guys that are either stretched to their absolute limit and just don't even have the time to look at these things, or we see people who go in and they're a bit older, and security to them is just not something that's been a forethought in their head. It's always become an afterthought and an after the fact case where like a lot of the IT guys I run into are in their 50s and 60s, and as long as it runs and works, they're happy and they move on to the next thing versus looking
Wow.
at something in depth and seeing, well, what might go wrong and what can happen.
Oh shit. What about ransomware? Have you ever come in contact with that with any clients?
Yes, ransomware actually swept through my state about uh, over the last 6 months. It's been about a 6 month engagement now that we've been on. We've had quite a few clients come to us to try to help with ransomware. And in some cases, we've been able to recover. In other cases, we've seen catastrophic losses.
Wow. And well, ransomware, if people don't know, is, well, tell people. I don't think it's too hard to explain what it is, but
Yeah, absolutely. So when ransomware, if you're infected, I'm sure a lot of people might remember the old browser hijacker things that would say, "Oh, the FBI has seen what you've been doing. Paid, $50 in Apple iTunes gift cards to this address, or else you're going to be arrested or something."
yeah.
And it's kind of evolved now to they've been able to get into your computer and encrypt your drive, and then they're the ones with the key. So essentially, they're taking everything you own and putting it in a safe, and they're saying, well, now you have to pay us Bitcoin to this address, or else it's gone forever. And your only two options are really to cut the loss and try to restore the best you can, or to pay them. And when you're paying a criminal, there's no guarantee you're going to get anything back.
Right. And I don't know. My thought is, like, how can you feel safe, like, even paying them? How do you know that they're not still, like, able to access your system at that point? Like, I think that there was, wasn't it like Saudi Aramco? Wasn't there like the story on Darknet Diaries about how they had ransomware, and what they did, what their solution after it was all over was they basically just like destroyed all the hard drives and started over their whole infrastructure.
Yeah, there's no real way to tell that someone's not still there if you're to pay them. What you really need to do is kind of either be a professional or have a professional come in and examine the system and lock it down
Right.
properly.
Man, it's just, if people really pictured what's going on with the internet and how information is exchanged, and people are so willy-nilly to like pay with things over like mobile networks and stuff now, they think that, I don't know, I think that people just like don't, they just like don't want to know. Like, if stuff is going on, it almost makes them feel better to not, they just like want to, it's like the IT guy that it's not really dealing with the security, like, we'll deal with it, we'll we'll cross that bridge when we come to it or something. It's such like a dated mentality. Like, people should really, don't you think that people should really pay more attention, and like what are some things that people can do to be more aware and avoid these types of things?
Usually, one of the things, at least from an awareness standpoint, that I always recommend is just keeping up to date on what's out there. I mean, there's a lot of really good web sources out there. The Hacker News is one, and it just kind of tells you what's going on out that you don't quite, generally you're not going to hear about every single hack on CNN unless it's something the size of Equifax
Yeah.
or Target or something like that.
Yeah.
Whereas these websites still cover all of them because that's kind of their niche.
Hmm.
And a lot of people can take there's really a few steps you can take to protect yourself, and you got to kind of be humble a little bit, I guess, and also think to yourself, how important are you to an attacker? Honestly, all of us are probably not that important. They look at us, if we're an easy target, they're going to hit us. If we're secure to a point where it's not worth the time investment, they're just going to move on and look for the next easy target.
Exactly. Exactly. I just wonder, people that have any sort of online presence, like if somebody gets, I don't know if you mess with the wrong person and then it becomes like a personal vendetta. Like I feel like that's more like a Hollywood movie script than something that happens in reality. But you do see it happen from time to time, right? Where like a streamer gets hacked, or the swatted thing. Like that's a totally different thing. It has nothing to do with. But that's more like doxing. Like even the doxing thing is scary. That's like hard to prevent too.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the big issues with it is we're kind of living in a time where people are able to become big personalities and become really important or famous just through the internet alone. And because of that, it
Hmm.
attracts all this attention from people that would otherwise not know your name. And
Hmm.
a lot of them are either just young or they might just be immature and not think a big deal of it, but they're going out there and they're doing things that could have real life consequences to people's lives.
It definitely makes you feel like you shouldn't take your security for granted when you have like a Twitch stream and stuff like that, because there's things with your Twitch stream that, like, if somebody got a hold of your account, it would be really catastrophic to your persona and stuff like that. They could just basically take control of your stream and like broadcast some stuff that you don't want out there. Like they could basically get you banned, is what I'm saying. Like,
Yeah, absolutely. And there we've seen it in the past and there's tons of stories on it of just, people out there with malicious intent go out and they cause some havoc just because they can.
mm-hmm. But you're fully white hat now. Did you ever, and white hat meaning like the good hacker, the person who still gets the keys to the kingdom to kind of go out there and poke around and see what is vulnerable, but you're actually helping companies strengthen their security versus the other side of it, whereas people are malicious and they are committing crimes like credit card fraud and whatever else. Like, I don't know what's profitable. I guess the ransomware thing is profitable for. It seems like the ransomware thing is people overseas. Like, you don't see people like living in the U.S. and like demanding gift cards being sent to a U.S. address. That seems like a bad move. Like places without extradition treaties. Yes.
Yeah,
Um,
extraditions become a very big issue in the cybersecurity world just because people can, commit crimes, say in Russia or somewhere that we may not be on the most friendly terms with politically,
mm,
and they use that to their advantage to basically get away with
yeah.
crime.
Yeah, so yeah, that is interesting. Yeah, the extradition thing. And it's come up before where I think the US has gone in and like kidnapped people and brought them back just to try to get them.
Yeah,
That happened a
essentially
few,
they've
few
done that.
times. That's crazy. It
But
seems wild, but like it seems like all of these laws surrounding just internet level crime, I don't know. There's so many things that people can profit, like people can profit off of, and I've seen this firsthand, is like basically having a streaming site where they put copyrighted material on it and then they have ads and they make money off the ads. That's like a kind of a gray area where people are making a good living off of that type of shit. That, or just like phishing and things like that, to where you don't really know where this money is going. It makes you feel a little bit uneasy. It's not really necessarily a gray area. It's just something that's hard to enforce. And people might not know that. Like, I learned this and it kind of blew my mind. Like, the Secret Service, they're like into like banking fraud and stuff like that. To us, that's like a good majority of what they do, right?
yeah, they take on a lot of cases that has to do with what's going on with financial institutions and the attacks that they've been receiving from a fraud standpoint.
Yeah, it's pretty nutty. Do you think you could have seen yourself maybe working for the Secret Service, like if you wouldn't have gone into where you are now?
I think my big goal might have been at one point going into the
NSA.
NSA.
Yeah.
The issue though is we've had a few government contracts and I've seen all the red tape and I've listened to some friends who have gone and worked in government sectors. It feels like a lot of things are very hard to get done, and when they do get done, there's always this level of who's this going to affect and how and why, and especially when you start to get into these really kind of seedy type of situations where it's all, well, am I spying on an American citizen? Why am I looking at this person's stuff? And things along those lines.
That does get to be a bit of a concerning thing. The Patriot Act definitely did change things, but like the surveillance has been going on forever. But yeah, like you have to be justified in order to look into people. But yeah, but what if the person's innocent? Like, I don't know how possible it is. Like if there was somebody who was alleged to have done something, how possible it would be that they weren't doing, that they were doing absolutely nothing wrong, right? Like if they're triggering some red flags, there had to have been something going on.
Yeah, absolutely. But I also think a lot of it kind of comes down to like your own personal morals and how you feel about these things. There are some people who are
Oh
absolutely
yeah.
gun ho and they'll go in, they don't care as long as it's a paycheck. And there's just some other people out there that would go, well, I'll never work for an organization that would even think about spying on its own people like that.
Huh. Well, where do you fall in line as far as that goes? Do you feel like you wouldn't be okay with spying on?
Honestly, I really don't like digging too deep into people's lives without having to. So for me, if I were to work on cases like that, I would probably want something along the lines of a court order and a very strict scope written up of who I'm allowed to investigate, the exact reason for it. But then again, these are things you don't exactly get to choose in that line of work. You're expected to
Hmm.
do what your job is, and that's your job at that point.
Right. Yeah, I guess there would be maybe what the system would like. What would be required to monitor these people's internet activity, and they might just be able to be justified due to like their protocols. You know.
Yeah, it's definitely something you kind of keep in the back of your head, especially when you work in cybersecurity. Not only from that standpoint, but sometimes you kind of wonder yourself, am I on a watch list, and whose watch list may I be on? Because a lot of us kind of do some gray hat stuff in our free time.
Hmm.
I personally do look for vulnerabilities out there in my free time that's not really sanctioned by a company or an individual, and if I find it, I find it. If not, whatever. But
Hmm.
at what point is it where you might be noticed by somebody? Like
Right.
for example, I use what's called Shodan a lot, and it's a essentially you can look at IP addresses and domains and find out a ton of information on them. And it turns out there's a service that's called Twonky. I don't know if you've heard of this, but it's essentially like a backup to hard drives. And I went in and I found it, and I tried to authenticate against it. Well, most for the most part, by default, it comes with no username or password. But a lot of people put them on their network, on their home networks, and they'll back up, their phones, their
Yeah.
pictures and drives. Well, if you click the link, it'll bring you to 127.0.0.1 / and then the URL. Turns out that vulnerability specifically, that's going to bring you to your home address. So you're not going to get anything. But if you take the IP address that you were just researching and put that in place of the 127.0.0.1, you have access to people's entire, like I've found driver's licenses, credit cards,
Oh
personal
my God.
photos, and these are all people going out and buying this device and willingly just throwing it on their network and backing up their iPhone to it. Especially if you're in a household with 3 or 4 people, teenagers or adults, regardless, what would people have on their iPhone that might be automatically backed up that they don't want people to see?
Yeah, people just put photos and stuff on the cloud, and they don't, the whole all these celebrities getting their phones hacked. Well, no shit. Like maybe you shouldn't have that stuff on your phone. you know, that's crazy though, man. So what do you do in a situation like that where you find a vulnerability? Like, how do you report it? Do you report it? You just kind of like note it for yourself.
That one specifically, I believe, was discovered before I found it because I did some research into it afterwards.
Okay.
If it's something that I think no one has found or reported before, obviously, because sometimes you kind of got to look for that next paycheck. Is you see if the company that's affected
Bug
has a bug
bounty.
bounty program.
Yeah.
Absolutely. If they do, that's great. Go for it. If not, some people like to hold on to those things and use them for whatever personal reasons. I would still end up
Mm.
reporting it though.
Yeah, because you're not about that life.
Yeah, and I just feel that that's something, at least from my point of view. Like for example, if my Discord was sitting there streaming my camera all the time or something crazy like that, that's something I'd want to know about.
Yeah.
And I feel that if
Huh.
if Discord knew about it or knew that there was a way for someone to go in and look through my camera that they would fix it, then that's something I would report to
Hmm.
them if I found it.
Yeah, you definitely want to know these vulnerabilities and how they can hopefully not be used in your current line of work and stuff like that too, I'd imagine. But yeah, just knowing what's possible. And yeah, so you just kind of have this like kind of eternally curious mind about what's out there on the internet, like what's safe and what's not safe, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's
Or
definitely
secure and not secure is probably how you would term it. But
yeah, it's definitely a secure or inquisitorial mindset that you want to have, and curiosity and looking at things and seeing how and why they work, and that's kind of what just leads you down rabbit holes. And sometimes those rabbit holes, you get to a point where you're like, okay, if I go any further, this can one land me in some big trouble, and two, this is stuff I'm not going to want to see.
yeah. So what happened with that Tuan key? Did they secured it
No,
and all that? No.
it's still
Oh
there.
wow.
I can
Oh
pull up
geez.
examples to this day because I go and check every now and again. And even the
Wow.
issue is, even if they did release a patch or something along those lines to fix it,
Is it the hardware?
it's once the hardware's it's a hardware system, or it's kind of like
Okay.
packaged with this external hard drive type of deal. And the thing is, if they do fix it, it's not, how often, even before this, I had to do a Windows update because I hate updating, and I'm a security
Yep.
person. I still hate still hate it. So you got to think it's going to live on for years to come after
Oh my
the
God.
after it is fixed.
Oh wow, that's crazy. So what should people like? Obviously, keep your shit up to date. Okay, keep your shit up to date. Like don't sleep on that. We all kind of bitch about Windows updates, but they're usually like security updates. Like it's usually what they are.
Yeah, absolutely. And then going a bit deeper, there's a lot of steps people should probably take in their personal lives with these things. Like, if you get a shiny new toy and it comes with the password admin, change the password, or
Yeah,
or at least
yeah.
like look into what exactly you're buying. Like these people with these the new issue that's come out with all the ring cameras. That was a big
Oh,
thing
that's right.
recently, where now people can look at you through your camera. And I got a call from my mother, and she's like, "Oh, did you see
God.
this? This is crazy." And I go, well, yeah, it is, but I can go online right now and pull up 50 other cameras that have nothing to do with Ring
Yeah,
and still do that. It's not
yeah. The
just
people.
that one.
Yeah. Explain that thing because that was a troubling deal where people having these networked webcams that were just completely insecure and they're able to just be people. You just like pull the IP address out of the air, and then once you find it, you can just basically look at it. You can just pull it up.
Yeah.
It's a streaming video, right?
Yep. And I would attribute a lot of that again to that site I mentioned before, Shodan. Is it's great for finding stuff like that. Like I've found
Is that considered like a packet sniffer or what is that? Like I don't understand what that's called. What is that?
it.
Like what is it supposed to?
It's essentially Google for IoT devices, so Internet of
Oh,
Things.
okay.
Like you can
Okay.
find smart fridges and just really weird stuff people put
Oh
online.
my
But
god. Yeah. What is a packet sniffer now that I brought it up? Like
so that would be something along the lines. If I were to do packet sniffing, I would use what's called Wireshark. It's a really popular
okay.
tool, but it essentially captures all the traffic that's going across a network to the best of its ability. There
Okay.
are some cases it can't read things that might be encrypted or whatnot, but it's not a tool that is essentially only pen testing, because what you'll find with a lot of the tools we use, or a lot of the methods we use, these are things used by regular IT guys. Wireshark could be used by an IT guy for legitimate reasons, by all means.
Mm.
But it's the misuse of it that comes into play when you're attacking a system.
What keeps you going? Like what keeps you going to where you don't get burnt out? Is it the variety of your job? Is it like helping people? Is it just that eternally curious mind? Like what is it?
I think it's a little bit of a mix. One of them is definitely that you're never done learning. My stepfather, he's an accountant, and he goes in and does the exact same thing every single day, comes home, and then goes in the next day and does it again. And I remember thinking about that at one point in my life, and I was like, man, if I did that, I would absolutely hate my life. And there's people out there that can do that, and more power to them. But for me, I like having a lot of variety where I can kind of pivot and focus. There's always new technology coming out. There's always new vulnerabilities to be found. And for that, it just kind of drives me, along with the fact that when I do come across customer engagements, being on red team, I'm not only doing penetration testing, so I can do so much more than that. And there's people out there that come into the security field that they do amazing things, and a lot of them, they might not even know how to code a single line. They may have never coded a single line in their life, but they are the most accomplished, either social engineers or talkers, presenters. These are people that can go in and they can emulate these threats to a scarily accurate degree without knowing a single line of code. And for me, that's just fascinating to see in the field.
Wow. That is crazy. So if people might be feeling like kind of vulnerable, like at risk because they don't really take too many steps to further their security. But like you said before, it's like, are you really a potential target for somebody? Well, as long as you don't have like an easily hacked password, I guess. Well, explain to me this because okay, I've never tried to hack a password. What does that actually entail? Let's say somebody has your like let's say like maybe even like Steam password or something. Like wouldn't the system like lock them out after a certain time, like trying so many varieties of it? Like what's a way that someone would get their like Steam account hacked?
So there's a few ways. A lot of it kind of involves social engineering, but you're absolutely right. A lot of
Okay.
systems these days will have lockouts where if you try brute forcing, you're not going to get very far. Credential stuffing is a personal favorite, which has become kind of popular lately. If you There's a website called Have I Been Pwned, and
Yeah.
it's run by a security researcher, and you go in and type your email, and it'll tell you if it's been in a leaked database. Well, there's other sites out there that you can do that, except if you pay them, say, $30 every 2 months, they'll also show you the password to that email address. Then you can take that and then go try to log into it. If it works, great. If not, well, what do we know about this person? Is this password something specific to them? Maybe that email address has 4 different passwords linked to it, and they all have the number, incrementing by one. These are things that you
Hmm.
can just kind of you got to go in and not only look at the raw data, but you have to kind of make some assumptions about human nature and what people are going to take for the easy route, and then kind of make your
Sure.
assumptions from there. There,
Yeah.
there's that, and then there's social engineering, where say you get a phishing email. One of my favorites was I've been getting these really fun ones from a fake site that hacks RuneScape accounts lately, and and they go, "Oh, your RuneScape, whatever has been updated. You need to go in and change your password or whatever." Most people are going to click it, not think anything up twice of it, because you go to a website, it looks
Hmm.
exactly like RuneScape. It feels like RuneScape.
Yeah.
The links will bring you to real RuneScape, and you enter your password, and then it's caught in someone's database, and they can use it themselves or sell it to the highest bidder and just kind of move on with their lives.
I listen to this podcast sometimes called Reply All. They had a guy on. He's kind of like a red team guy. They wanted to know whether phishing would be possible in their office. So like and they got the okay from like the heads of the company, to have this test done. And what the guy did was he created an email that looked very similar to one of the employees that worked there. It was like Dave at whatever podcastmedia.com, whatever it was. But instead of media, it was like the MED and then it was like LA.
Yep. That's what we do with a lot
So
of ours as well.
yeah, and then he made this web page that looked just like Google Drive. He was like, "Hey, we were working on this story, and here's a link to that audio that you needed, right?" And he's like, "Okay." He just clicked on it because it passed the eye test. He didn't look exactly at the source because it looked almost exactly the same. The link was like a short link. It wasn't anything. It wasn't actually drive.google.com. It was something else, but it couldn't tell what it was. It was like a bit.ly link or something. Clicked on it. It opened. It looked like Google Drive. So he entered his credentials, and then the guy was obviously able to capture those. And then he quickly logged into the guy's Google Drive, and then the on the fake website it popped up with the authentication thingy or whatever.
Hmm.
And so he had to quickly log in so the authentication thingy would pop up on his phone. And then he got it. And then he entered it. And it was like this back and forth, like really quick exchange. And then he got access to the guy's Google account.
Yep. That's
Yeah. And
something we see a lot.
that was as easy as you can, it doesn't even seem that sophisticated.
It's really not is the issue. And if you think about it, you got to, especially if you're on the receiving end of these things, you got to kind of take a step back and think to yourself, because like human nature, we want to do things as fast as we can, especially these days, and we want to get through things
Yes.
quickly. But like, have you ever just kind of taken a step back and looked at that URL really closely? Like, if you, for example, if you go on Facebook, did you really look and see am I really on Facebook? But most of us, just assume, well, it looks like Facebook, it must be Facebook.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we just assume, you turn on the machine works. It's not like, I should be careful. Needs to be kind of careful, And we don't realize that left click of the mouse or that tap on your phone, it could be like you could be one step closer to, something kind of seedy, something, who knows? Like, yeah, someone getting access to your accounts. And like how secure is two-factor and these they have the new like the Google keys and stuff like that. Like how secure are these things?
I definitely recommend them versus having nothing. The way we authenticate is it's something you have, something or something you are. So if it's something that's something someone else could know. If it's something you have,
Mm,
so say you have Google 2FA on your phone, then someone's got to work a lot harder to get that from you. They
right.
either need to steal your phone and know the passcode, or they'd have to do something like you just said, with being very, very clever and tricky. And I can almost guarantee you, not many people are going to take that many steps to attack the average human. It's going to be someone who has
Exactly.
something that
Yeah.
person wants badly.
It's not necessarily that sophisticated, but the time, because you have to wait for the person to actually engage with it, right?
Exactly.
And it may or may not work, right?
Yeah. And sitting there waiting and waiting and waiting, that's kind of counterproductive because a lot of criminals,
Mm.
they're essentially businesses in their own right. They want to get as much
Yep.
money as they can with the least amount of effort from as many people as they can. So they're going to take the
Hmm.
easiest road that they can to do that. And if you make it hard for them, chances are they're going to move on unless your personal threat landscape points to something where, let's say you do work for the government in some way, shape, or form, and you might have information that they really want out of your account. That's where you got to kind of also take a step back and go, well, how important am I to someone externally attacking me?
I guess when in doubt, like seek out help, seek out an expert, someone like yourself.
Absolutely.
But someone who's willing to kind of, and it seems like someone like you're like really willing to help because it just sort of it like plays completely into your interests, right?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the great things about the security community, and if you go outside of the few times there's drama, which is actually more often than not lately, if you go on Twitter and follow a lot of the people in security, they're extremely vocal about what they agree and disagree with, and what are things that people should be doing, and what's
Yeah.
safe and not safe. And they're always out there sharing information. It's not like the business trade where everything's a trade secret, and this is the secret sauce or the colonel's recipe. It's very,
Mm.
we want people to be secure, and a lot of people are going to go out of their way to help to the best of their ability. I mean, chances are someone's not going to go in and try to decrypt a ransomware infested computer for you if you're a stranger, but they will go out of their way to, what's the best password manager to use? What's something I can do to secure
Sure.
myself from this? What should I look for in a phishing email?
Yeah.
Things like that.
You got a couple of good handles for people to follow, maybe your own too. I don't know if you've been tweeting too much from your account, but
Unfortunately, I do not tweet as much as I as I retweet, because I
right.
feel there are people much smarter than I am in the industry that are doing amazing work, and I'm still relatively new.
Yeah, I think you'll get there, man. It's not that you're not they're like that much smarter. I think that maybe do you think it's fair to say like someone with more experience is just has that knowledge just comes in through experience.
Absolutely. But
Yeah.
if you're
Yeah, for
looking
sure.
for any, my personal handle is at @thelaughing_man. That's on Twitter. There's other people on
Mhm.
there as well. Hacking Dave. There's Hacks for Pancakes. She's a master social engineer that can absolutely scare the living daylights out of you on some of the stuff that she does. TinkerSec. There's a lot of people out there,
Yeah.
and honestly, after you follow the first one or two and see who they're retweeting, a lot of, once you get by some of the technical things, because they will go after some reports at times, you'll see a lot of the, this is for people who may not be tech experts but want to be secure.
Yeah, and I got more questions. I know that. We're going to have to do a part 2 for sure. I mentioned kind of that we wanted to at a time like work on that G2A story. How legitimate are these sites? Because you've had experience with them too. How legitimate do you think that G2A and Kingwin and sites like these are? And like, and if they're not, like, what are the problems with those?
I think they're very legitimate in the fact that they are selling real keys and they are providing a real service. And there are people that have sold on these sites before that are just, average people. They might have a spare key or two and they're looking to make a quick dollar to buy a different game. But these companies are also really, really willing to turn a blind eye and not really enforce, some of the shadier things that happen on their sites. And because of that, I think they shouldn't be trusted nearly as much as a real, third party retailer. And honestly, with a lot of companies these days, it's kind of come to light that they're getting negatively affected to the point where they'd rather have people pirate games than lose money on
Yeah.
these false transactions. So at that point, I think it would have been time right then and there for G2A and sites like that to kind of step up and and come up with a good policy that's enforceable, and two, actually enforce it. But they kind of just shrugged and offered some payout if people could prove things, but we haven't really heard much since then.
Yeah. Oh, I know. It just it seems like it's almost just the scale of how many of these transactions take place. Even if 99% of them are legitimate, there's still that 1% is a giant number. And it's been shown that like credit card fraud has cost these companies untold thousands of, hundreds of thousands of dollars, in some cases like millions, depending on the size of the company. When it comes to indie developers, they really get victimized in this way. And those were the guys that were coming out and saying basically it would be better for you guys if for us if you just pirated our games rather than buy them from them.
Yeah, for me, it's too shady
Yeah.
and not
Yeah.
anything. You're saving a few percent on something, but do you really want to potentially be hurting the company that you're supporting? And on top of that, you're giving credit card information to a site that's already known to be shady. Do you really want your credit card in their systems for who knows what?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. A good site that people can go to see if there are deals on video games is just isthereanydeal.com. You can go there and it's a search engine for any game, and it'll check up multiple services to see if it's been on sale. It'll show you like trends of like the lowest price it's been, so you know whether it's a good time to buy it now or not,
Yeah. And there's also great sites like Humble Bundle comes to mind immediately, and
Of
they're
course.
obviously,
Of
they
course.
support charity and they take the extra steps that are necessary as well. So it's
I mean, it might not be brand new games, but it'll be usually they got some good stuff going on.
yeah, and companies like that kind of prove that it's not something that can't be done. It can absolutely be done. It's just a matter of, is the company willing to kind of step up to the plate when they're needed to, even though they're not strictly reselling keys. They reach directly out to the publishers, but they're taking their business and giving really good discounts and really good prices while doing it in a way that's not harming anybody.
Right. It's just, I think that maybe even if a company like G2A, like, we're well-meaning, I just don't know with the way people are able to get on their site and resell. Like, they claim that if somebody does engage in fraud and it's proven that they get banned from their site from selling, well, okay, that's one guy. Like, it seems like a bunch of them just pop up in their place. That's how these things work. It doesn't make them the good guys in this situation.
Yeah.
They're very much so profiting off of it, right? Because they're allowing the marketplace to be there,
And if you think about it, honestly, banning someone on that site does nothing, because what's it going to stop them from just making a new account?
Right. Because they're obviously they're sophisticated enough to obtain this fraudulent information, making another G2A account under a different alias. Like, that's not going to be, I don't know, like you've been through there, like, because you've sold keys on that site before, right?
Yes, I've sold some spare keys. It was some time ago.
In the
so I'm not 100% sure
right,
if it's changed.
but they're like identity verification. I'm not sure how deep they go into that.
Oh, they
if
don't.
It's a matter of they just don't.
They asked for a PayPal account to deposit the
knows?
money into, and that was it.
Right.
But again, that was 2014,
damn,
so that's kind of dated information.
Yeah. I think what we need to do in the future is maybe compile some questions from some people in the community and see if we can answer some of
Yeah.
those. And I gotta think. I gotta really like go through. Now that I know a little bit more about your background, maybe we'll have to get into some stories, like some stories of things that you've dealt with
Oh yeah,
firsthand.
I've got some
But
fun ones, especially after this month.
well,
Uh,
okay. I guess maybe if people have listened this far, maybe they deserve a story. Maybe you've got one in the tank that you can explain.
sure.
Something that happened this month. Like what's the worst case scenario that happened this month? And is this to do with the ransomware?
I'll just give a quick overview on. So this month, this engagement is still ongoing, so I can't give final details till it's done. But there was a few months ago, um, I was hired to do a job for a casino. Not going to say where or which casino, but we did what's called full scope engagement. So this is where we do our social engineering, internal, external. I'm allowed to sneak in and try to, break into buildings, things like that. And we ran our social engineering first, and we had about a 20% capture rate. That means there was a 20% chance that someone was going to enter their email address and password for us, for their company login, not their personal. This company was about 2,000 employees, so we had a few hundred to work with about. And then we went to the client site. I found their employees had posted pictures themselves wearing the company badge, so I made a fake badge. Waltzed straight through the doors, and this was at a casino, mind you. And their casinos are locked down more than banks in a lot of cases.
Yes.
It was almost like it brought me back. Actually, I was watching Ocean's 11. You see where the
Classic.
guy gets kind of lost in the corridors. That's exactly what happened. Those corridors look exactly like that. It's just a big maze. But I went in. I spent 4 days there. Everyone thought, because I dressed up in a suit and tie with the badge, everyone thought I was a high level exec. They let me do whatever I want. I logged into their systems and eventually got access to their accounting, their head of accounting, the CTO or CFO, his account. And I was able to see where their money was moving, how often it was moving. I think it was somewhere around 32 million a week was being moved from their account to their banks.
Fuck.
And at that point, I took my pictures. I took my pictures, but I had to make note for the client. If I were an attacker, I would have changed that routing to my, offshore Bahamas, whatever routing account, and that money would have been gone.
Yeah. Wow.
And it was that's kind of just the quick and dirty of the engagement. There's a lot more that we found. We were able to exploit a lot of systems. At one point, I got access to their power. They had an on-site power plant, so they could keep the casino and resort, running if power went out. And we got access to the control room there. Could have turned off everything and just left the place.
Wow.
It all hinged heavily on social engineering, not even computer knowledge. It was mostly looking like you belonged, acting like you belonged, and tricking people with some fake emails.
So how good are you in that first point of contact? Because you had the badge, you had the suit and tie on. What was it like? Like you found the employee entrance or something like that?
So like a lot of casinos, what they had was they had the casino on one side of the building and then the resort on the other. And there's kind of an employee area where you can in between, where you just kind of swipe a card and go through. And I didn't have a badge clone or anything, so I just kind of would stand there with a piece of paper and my phone in my hand to make it look like I was taking notes on something real quick. And if I saw someone walk in or out, I'd ask them to hold the door and, smile and a nod, and you walk through.
Tailgating. Yes. Yep. Classic. Wow. Yeah, they're going to be doing some serious security upgrades there. I can only imagine. Holy shit. That is wild, man. I'm sure there's a lot more to that story, but it seems like once you were in and everybody established that you belong, like it didn't even matter. Like as long as you didn't, I don't know, like you didn't do anything too sketchy, like you were going to be fine for.
Yeah, after your first day in there, the thing I like to do is if it's a multi-day engagement is you walk around the building and make sure you're seen by everybody so that they kind of have that preconceived notion that you belong. And then the day 2 and day 3, it's a breeze because you just walking in and out. I think I walked out. They had a training room full of iPads, and I took about 6 iPads, put them in my bag, and left. It's just for fun because I had no idea what else to take at that point.
Yeah. Wow. Crazy. So I'm sure some people, if they're thinking about this, and maybe people want to know more details, you can tweet. They can maybe like tweet at you some questions or something at the laughing underscore man. Is
Yes.
that it? Yeah. Okay. But has there ever been a situation where you've gotten caught?
I have been caught one time in the
Okay.
last 3 years now, which is astoundingly low and very surprising to me. But it was one of my first engagements. I had to go into a building and deal with a man who was not very pleasant at all. And it's never a pleasant
Okay.
time when you get caught, I would assume. But he was. I called my boss and let him know at the end of that part of the engagement, because there were several buildings we had to hit, and this was just one. And he goes, "Oh yeah, I know that guy. He's a dick." It's like, "Oh, okay."
So, but you got caught like really quickly, or how did it go
I
down?
walked in, I gave my story. I believe that one I was pretending to be a intern, and I told him I was sent from the other building to
Mhm.
do some work. And he stopped. He called the person I told him to call, who we always give them our point of contact in those situations. Our point of contact kind of made up an excuse of, "Oh, he's at the wrong building," and then we left. But we considered that being caught or a failure, even though no police were
Oh,
called. We always keep a
ah,
what we call the get out of jail free card, which is signed by all the higher ups at the company we're attacking.
sure.
But we didn't have to pull that, at least.
Exactly. Oh, kind of a bummer though. Like you didn't even get to try.
No,
That guy
he
just
shut it
shut it
down right
down.
away, but the rest of his employees did
Huh.
not get as far.
Damn. How often do you think people kind of get fired because of these failures, or do companies tend to more like do like retraining and certification and like upgrading their security?
That's kind of hit and miss. Some of the companies we don't see for quite some
Mm,
time after. Uh,
sure. Maybe you don't even
yeah,
know.
there was one company we worked with, and I know the person. I gave her the same spiel I gave that guy of, "Oh, I'm the intern. Can you show me what I'm supposed to be doing here?" And I was pretending to be the IT intern for this one. And she goes, "Oh, yeah, sure." She left me alone in a secure room with all their computers and gave me all the passwords to everything so I could quote unquote work. And she still works there. But I feel there's a point where if somebody fails too many times on too many separate engagements, the company
Right.
kind of takes some action.
Yeah, like if they fail twice at the same thing, like they obviously didn't learn, and maybe the next time it's going to be someone who's actually going to do some
Absolutely.
damage. Okay, so this is going to be the final like story related question, I guess. It just popped in my head. Have you ever worked for a client that has had like sort of like a social engineering breach, like where someone was on site and then you went and worked with them? Have you ever heard of these things actually taking place other than people like yourself
Uh,
doing
we've
pen
heard of it
testing?
taking place from our specific clients, not exactly. For the most part, so just as
Hmm.
background information, I'm in upstate New York, so there's not a lot out here. And we have clients, across the United States, and we'd fly out to them and all of that.
Sure.
But even then, a lot of the cases where if somebody's going to make that personal risk themselves and go on site, chances are the company's a lot bigger. And in those cases, we end up seeing things like, oh, it wasn't too long ago, I believe two Russian spies slash hackers over in the UK were caught kind of sitting outside of a building trying to hack their Wi-Fi, and that was a huge risk on
Okay.
their end. And when you're taking a risk that
Yeah.
that big, it has to be for a very big payoff. And a lot of the companies,
Yeah.
yeah, a lot of the
Yeah.
companies that call us for IR or instant response is usually because they get hit with ransomware or something, which is usually delivered through
Okay.
emails or web pages.
Yeah. It's mostly digital, but still having that on-site security is something that some companies really need to. Obviously, that casino needed to worry
Yeah,
about it.
we get a lot of casinos and banks are the two that mostly worry about, or other financial institutions also that have to worry about that.
People should really listen. If these stories seem interesting to you, I know the Darknet Diaries is an amazing podcast for that.
Yes, absolutely.
Any others? Any other like media, YouTube stuff like that that you've encountered that are good for those types of stories?
There's a few here and there. The one actually that really pokes out to me is there was this really obscure National Geographic, kind of like a short series. I think it was called Breakpoint or something along those lines. But you'll notice
Hmm.
there's a Darknet Diaries episode where he talks about breaking into a bank at a Middle Eastern country and how he walks out with the computers.
Yes.
This episode of
Yeah.
Breakpoint actually shows some of the video that he recorded during the break-in because he used a little pin
Oh,
cam.
really? Oh, cool.
And
Man.
things like that. There's always these obscure things on kind of like documentary shows that get a little bit, or they'll go in depth on hacking to an extent. Like
Yeah.
there's the one from Vice as well about cybersecurity. It's the name's escaping my mind, but every episode for 2 seasons is nothing but a different issue in cybersecurity and talking with experts.
After this podcast is done, I think we'll go through and collect some links, and we'll dump them in the show notes for people to click on. And they're not. I promise they're not going to be phishing links. Okay, they're like legitimately. I'm just kidding. Yeah, man, this is a lot of fun. I think that we're definitely going to have to do a follow up and maybe a series in the future. It's just going to depend on it's going to depend on me. I'm going to have to really get my shit together because it's going to take some time. But if I can think of a way to do it where it's entertaining and informative and relevant, the whole G2A thing, like at the time when I wanted to do that story, it was kind of around the time when these indie developers were speaking out about it, and I was looking more into it. And nowadays, it's not like it's not relevant. It's just, I don't know, like everybody, there's enough content on it out there already. I'd like to find underreported issue if possible. So we'll have to kind of dig into that and see if there is something.
Absolutely. And also keep in mind, we never know when the new Eternal Blue or the new malware strain is going to hit. So there's always things that come up, and when they do come up, we can absolutely go into depth on those as well as things become more relevant or evolve over time.
Yeah, I think that maybe the scariest thing is that these threats that come out are maybe like the scariest ones are ones that you never expect. Right? Just something gets leaked and then all of a sudden all these machines are vulnerable. It's crazy.
That's become one of the jokes in the security community lately, actually, is that attackers are smart, and a lot of the things they'll do, especially the things they know are going to make big headlines, they tend to happen right around when most of us are on holiday or on vacation. And we're sitting there, I remember when it was Eternal Blue, I was in Cancun at the time, and I had no computer with me, and I was on my phone on the hotel Wi-Fi, like, oh man, what's going on out there?
You get your Hawaiian shirt on, you're drinking a fruity drink, and you're like, what the hell? I'm in the wrong place right now. Oh, damn. I think it's really badass that you were able to pursue something that is so perfectly suited to you and you're thriving, dude. I always knew, like, whatever you did, that you were going to put your full effort into it, right? And you can say whatever you want about that. Maybe, I don't know how you feel about that, but like, I always knew that you were going to be successful, really. So that's really cool, man. If somebody wanted to get started, or if they feel like they might be interested, where should they go? Like, what type of resources are available online and on college campuses and that? Like, what should people do?
What I highly recommend is first taking a step back and thinking about what you want to do, because this field is absolutely huge. We have people that specialize in networks, people that specialize in social engineering, people that specialize in pen testing, blue team, red team, purple team, IR, it's absolutely huge. And you don't need to be technical to do it. You can be, you can just be a psychologist that thinks that human brain is fascinating, and figuring out what makes people do things is fascinating. So figuring out what you want to do first is, I think, not entirely essential, especially if you're getting into cybersecurity just at first glance, but having some direction into what you want to research, or even just knowing, hey, these topics are cool to me. I'm going to go down the list and see which one I really want to, take a big bite out of. But once you do, there's a lot of really good resources out there. Pen Tester Academy, that's a website you can go on. I have a subscription to it myself. It's $30 a month for students if you have a student email, I believe. But they train you in concepts of cybersecurity. You have hands-on lab exercises, so you're doing it in a safe environment when nobody, you're not attacking someone's personal system. This is allowed for you to attack.
Right.
Hackthebox.eu is a really big one as well. Those are a bit more on the advanced side. You have to have a bit of know-how to kind of attack those machines, but it's a really good resource and it's free.
Cool, man. And is it essential for someone to get a degree? Like, can you get a job without a degree?
Absolutely. You do not need a degree at all in this field. Some of the best people have come into this field with, their high school knowledge or just their passion for computers and absolutely blown it out of the water.
You got to have the skills to pay the bills, basically, right?
Yep. And even if you don't have the skills, having the drive and wanting to learn.
Yeah. And that's really what you had to start out with. And now you're kind of gaining knowledge as you go.
Absolutely.
Yeah, man. Well, hey, this was great. Obviously, plug your Twitter. That's kind of where you exist now online. You're not going to be doing any sort of like Twitch streaming or anything in the future. I would guess you're too busy with work, but anything that you've got going on, let people know.
Absolutely. So Twitter, _man. If you do want to see anything on Twitch, twitch.tv/ShadyDaysGaming. Honestly, it's been on the back burner for quite a bit. I keep saying I'll get back to it, and something comes up.
Yeah, priorities, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, Discord, if anyone wants to message me on there, that's where I'm the most responsive, is thelaughingman #7607.
Gotcha. All links in the show notes, and I'll put out on Twitter or Discord. People could be able to ask questions. Ask a hacker. That sounds fun, doesn't it?
Yeah, that I can't promise that I'll know everything because nobody in this field knows everything, but I will do my absolute best.
Yeah. It's not stump a hacker, it's ask a hacker.
Yeah.
All right, man. Thanks again.
All right. Thank you.
Music in this episode is from the artist Data Rebel. All relevant links you can find in the show notes or on our website, pod.co/emotive. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram @Emotive Podcast. I look forward to this next month. I've got quite a few episodes in the works. I'll see you soon. Thanks for listening.